The cause of it all. Whoa there, I'm way ahead of myself. Mom and Dad came to Canada from Wales, but not together. My father's life prior to his marriage to my mother is somewhat of a mystery. Born in Mithier Tide for Wales, he went underground in the mines at age 9, joined the army band when he was 13 and served in both the army and the navy before coming to Canada as a childless widower in the 1920s. In Cadomin, Dad worked in the mines as a fire boss and on mine rescue teams. He later displayed his musical bent by playing the clarinet in his spare time. Life circumstances may have dictated that Dad came to Cadomin, but it was by sheer fate that he boarded with Fanny and Dick Brown, my mother's older sister. My mother, Alice Gertrude Williams, was born in Llandovery, Wales in 1891, and the third of what would become a family of 21 children. When she was 16 years old, she married William Owen and had 2 sons, William Griffiths and Ronald George Owen. Years after having served in the army during World War I, her first husband passed away as a result of war injuries. The government set Mum up at a small house front store to help support the family. The local miners, coming and going to work, would stop to buy oranges and chewing tobacco to keep their mouths moist from the ever-present coal dust. They would also buy chalk to mark the cars of coal that they had loaded in order to be paid. Being enterprising, she produced homemade ice cream, which proved a popular sales item. As a widow with 2 grown sons, the hope for new opportunities in Canada with her beloved older sister Fanny overcame her ties to Wales. Thankfully, she couldn't foresee the challenges she was about to face. Years earlier, my mother's older brother and sister, George and Fanny Williams, and her younger brother, Tom Williams, had migrated to Canada and established themselves on the coal branch. Uncle George and Uncle Tom worked at Pocahontas until the mine caught fire. Uncle Tom and his wife Maggie headed towards Hinton, then on to Mountain Park before finally settling in Cadomin. Uncle George married Fanny Brown, and Aunt Fanny married Fanny Brown's brother Dick. Hence, a brother and a sister married a brother and a sister. Although Uncle George left the mines for good and established his family on a large farm on Lulu Island, now known as Richmond, Aunt Fanny and Uncle Dick continued to reside in Cadomin. Since Dad was boarding with Aunt Fanny and Uncle Dick, Aunt Fanny managed to convince Dad to visit his homeland, and while there, to visit her aging mother and widowed sister, Alice Gertrude Owen. In the meantime, Fanny had written home telling her sister that Jack Smith was a fine man. It was after Jack's visit to Wales that Mom decided to come to Canada to stay with Fanny. A conspiracy, I think. Nevertheless, she had her 2 sons, Bill and Ron, sold their meager belongings, picked up their trunks, and set sail for Canada, leaving behind the security of the small store in their Welsh village for an unfamiliar life in Cadomin. After many exhausting days at sea, they arrived in Canada to find they had to go at least another 5 days by rail to get to their actual destination. They arrived at Edson to find a railway shunting and maintenance yard and a large train station bordered by a bit of a lawn on each side. The main street going through Edson was a very wide street full of muddy potholes, not remotely like the Welsh villages. It was flanked on both sides with numerous buildings and businesses. To add to their shock of their trip, they were met at the station by Jack Smith, Dick, and May Davis from Luscar, and a minister with a marriage license. Surprise! The Canadian Welcoming Committee explained to her that there was no suitable accommodation for her and her 2 children in Cadomin, except in Jack Smith's cabin, and the minister only came around once a month. Mum was required to make up her mind as to whether or not she would marry Jack, while the others sat at the station awaiting her decision. No pressure here. Living together to get to know each other was not an option. It was fortunate for me that Mother decided to marry a man she hardly knew. My existence, as well as these memories, was dependent on that choice. Just when it seemed things could not get any worse, they realized the ordeal of their trip was not over. They had another 65 miles to travel on the famous Blue Flea, the passenger train on the Coal Branch Line that would take them to Cadomin, one of the most magnificent and beautiful places in the world, and an outdoorsman's paradise. At the end of the day, however, Mother was not impressed, as they put her trunks down on the dirt floor in the 2-room cabin and no running water or indoor plumbing. She was so depressed that she sat down on her trunks and cried. In fact, she cried for 3 days. Finally, Dad said to her, "Cheer up, Gert. We can have a good life or a bad one. It depends on what you make it." It was not long after that they got lumber from the company and built the floors and some walls. Later on, they added the living room. Slowly, they settled into married life in Cadomin. As fall moved into winter, the newly floored cabin was warm and cozy. The days became shorter and the nights longer. Most years, there'd be ice by Halloween, with varying amounts of snow falling. With our altitude at over 5,000 feet, on some occasions, we even had sports days snowed out on the 1st of July, Dominion Day. Catamin's long winter nights were clear and crisp. One could see thousands and thousands of stars in the inky black sky. Every so often, one would see a shooting star, something rarely seen in the city night sky. Some nights, as one stood or walked in the crisp snow, the skies would put on a magnificent show of the northern lights. The aurora borealis, a natural phenomenon that we took for granted, were like ghostly shears, shimmering and shifting through the northern hemisphere with a pinging or twinging sound. When the temperature dropped really low, you could hear people talking from across the valley, and hundreds of coyotes would answer the locomotive when it blew its whistle. The haunting, eerie sound could be heard for miles. There were long stretches in my younger years when there was little to do but go out, get cold, then come in and warm up. Without television, Nintendo, or computer games for entertainment, we would often get tired of our outdoor pursuits like sleigh riding, skiing, and tobogganing. Our after-school equivalent to watching television was listening to radio programs like The Lone Ranger, The Shadow, The Thin Man, Buck Rogers, forerunner of NASA, Dick Tracy, and Superman. These programs really stretched the imagination. It seems strange now that what we took to be fictional and imaginary, such as rockets, wristwatch radios, and laser beams, have today become reality. For some people, imagination can get out of hand. One lad who imagined he was Superman tied one of his mom's bath towels around his neck and jumped off their woodshed. He was lucky to have only broken his wrist. Radio, magazines, and films were closely regulated and highly censored. The Farmers program used to come on after school on CJCA or CFRN Edmonton. It was an excellent children's program. One day after school, while lying on the couch enjoying the narrative, the program abruptly ended and there was at least 30 seconds of silence. While waiting to see what program was next, as it was too early for the Green Hornet, suddenly the silence was broken by the farmer. I guess he thought he was off the air. He blurted out, "That ought to hold the little bastards for a while." It seems it held him for a while because he was never heard on air again. They replaced his program with another children's program. Then there was Bob Hope. He was asked one night what the difference was between Mae West and a battleship. After giving his answer, he was immediately cut off the air and replaced by gentle music. Some people thought it was silly, others thought it was too strict. It was like the little boy who put his finger in the dike to stop the leak and prevented a flood. Since then, the finger has been removed. There may be something to be said for censorship. Besides listening to the radio, indoor pastimes included coloring, doing puzzles, reading, and fighting with siblings. With many sub-zero hours of winter to fill, building flying model airplanes of balsa wood and playing with Meccano sets and Tinker toys were favorite activities. These are times when outdoor pursuits are just not an option. When outdoor conditions were favorable, there was no shortage of winter pastimes to occupy the days. After a fresh snowfall, we played an outdoor game called Fox and Geese. In preparation for the game, we would run in a large circle until the snow was packed down and then quarter it like a pie, running across the cuts until they were well packed also. From the middle of the circle, we would cut a path and then a den inside each quarter wedge. The geese were assigned a den, which was a safe place from the fox. Geese would run around the circle trying to keep away from the fox, and when in jeopardy of being caught, they could run into their dens for safety. The first unfortunate goose tagged by the fox would take the fox's place, being it. We passed many noisy, joyful hours in this way. However, it was hockey that was our main passion. With snow tightly packed down, 2 rocks acting as goalposts, and a piece of board for a goalie stick, the game of ground hockey would commence. A tennis ball substituted for a puck. If we were fortunate, we would play hockey at the rink, on a pond, or on a flooded tennis court. All hockey options failing, we would settle for skating during the general skating times at the rink. Catamin had a closed-in, regulation-sized ice arena with an additional sheet of ice for curling on the east side and another on the west side. The change rooms were situated at the south end, while just over the walkway there was a bandstand. When they built the new curling rink with 3 sheets of ice adjoining the arena, the old curling sheet on the west side of the arena was then used for bleachers. The curling sheet of ice on the east side was employed for youngsters learning to skate. That reminds me of bob skates. They belted onto your boots and had double runners to slide on. I think back on them with amusement. They did very little to help me learn to skate, but they did give me something to occupy my time and make me feel like part of the group. My first pair of skis was 2 long barrel staves with leather straps attaching them to my gumboots. A third ski for my behind would have been appropriate, as it would have received the most action. As the winter days passed into spring, we experienced another strange phenomenon. Warm breezes would swoop in from over the mountains, and the thaw would be on. The snowdrifts would start to shrink, the ditches would fill with fast running water, and then the ground would start to soften. It was time to pull on our gumboots, stuff our pant legs inside, and sail homemade boats in the fast flowing water in the ditches. Some of the boats were aesthetically pleasing. Others, well, they floated. Oblivious to time, our great adventure would be shattered by a loud, high-pitched voice. "Jackie! Jackie! Donnie! Time for supper!" I'd hear my mother call. A call that would permeate my whole childhood.